As we've looked at in previous videos, Darth Vader's defeat to Obi-Wan on Mustafar significantly impacted Vader both physically and mentally in the earliest days after their duel, with the frustrations and difficulties Vader experienced being demonstrated within legends through novels such as Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader and Death Star. The Rise of Darth Vader reveals that only a few weeks after his defeat on Mustafar, Vader felt as though he'd lost everything, including the self-confidence and skill he experienced as Anakin. But his reliance upon the suit and cybernetics he was given, something that was required due to the injuries he sustained on Mustafar, was also paramount to Vader's feelings of significant loss, with The Rise of Darth Vader doing an excellent job of explaining the difficulties Vader had regarding his abilities to see, hear, breathe, and many other aspects after Mustafar. The suit caused Vader to experience moments of claustrophobia, finding it to be a prison of the worst sort. He considered his situation to be one that couldn't be defined as living, having moments where he wanted to emerge and rid himself of the suit entirely. While Vader recognized that his suit and cybernetics provided him with power, he believed this power lacked a clear purpose. Although by the end of the novel, Vader would overcome some of these aspects as he experienced the power available through the dark side of the Force, power that allowed him to feel uniquely invulnerable and which made his suit and cybernetics less important. However, I think we can say it didn't ultimately change Vader's view regarding the limitations of his suit and the resulting frustrations even afterwards. In this way, within these Legends materials, it's very difficult to see how Vader could ultimately have viewed his defeat to Obi-Wan on Mustafar as helpful to him in any meaningful way. For example, within the Legends novel Death Star, 3 years before the Battle of Yavin, we again see Vader consider numerous aspects connected to the outcome of his duel with Obi-Wan and his defeat, with some points being similar to those seen in The Rise of Darth Vader, experienced during the earliest days of the Empire. Vader again recognized the limitations of his suit, understanding that there was not enough time to create the life support systems specifically to his needs, and what he was provided was certainly not state-of-the-art technology. In the end, Vader seemed to come to terms with the fact that he and the suit were one for the remainder of his life, merely because there was nothing he could do about it otherwise. Although he didn't view the suit favorably, he accepted it as it was necessary. Aside from the suit itself, and focusing more on the consequences of his defeat to Obi-Wan more generally, the novel Death Star reveals that although Vader saw that he was so much more at that point than what he was before Mustafar, Vader still at this point considered that in many ways, he was so much less than what he'd been before. In this way, not surprisingly, Vader clearly focused upon the immense negative aspects that resulted from his defeat to Obi-Wan even years after the events of Episode 3. This perspective from Vader would have been significantly difficult to avoid, as the novel also points out that Vader experienced constant pain, with any healing he did achieve never lasting. One last aspect that I want to point out from these Legends materials, specifically from Death Star, was the idea that Vader clearly saw his life within the suit and the difficulties and frustrations he experienced after Mustafar as having been forced upon him. I think we can say that, for Vader, he believed that it was not his destiny or fate to be what he was after Episode 3. Death Star reveals that he was reminded at times that it wasn't his own will, but the will of Sidious that he'd become what he did. Even more, he saw that it was Obi-Wan who was responsible for making him as he was after Episode 3. For this reason, only 3 years before the Battle of Yavin, Vader recognized that Obi-Wan was still alive, and he saw this as, quote, a very good thing, as it would allow him to eventually confront and strike Obi-Wan down, thereby causing Obi-Wan to pay for what he did to Anakin. In this way, Vader's life, which saw him reliant upon his suit and cybernetics, and all of the pain and frustrations that came with it, was not one of his own design. Instead, it was taken from him, replaced by what was imposed upon him by Sidious and Obi-Wan. Therefore, knowing these aspects from Legends, it's not necessarily surprising to consider that Vader wouldn't see his defeat to Obi-Wan on Mustafar in Episode 3 as ultimately helpful to him. As The Rise of Darth Vader and Death Star novels demonstrate, Vader's defeat to Obi-Wan contributed to his view of having lost everything, and while he was on a path towards power through the dark side of the Force, the Sith Lord believed that in many ways, he was still so much less than what he'd been previously. His defeat to Obi-Wan caused Vader constant pain, and made him reliant upon a suit that wasn't merely frustrating through its numerous limitations, but which he considered to be a prison of the worst sort. In the end, Vader recognized that his life after Episode 3 was, in many ways, the result of the will of Sidious, and it was forced upon him through the actions of Obi-Wan. In Legends then, we can clearly see how Vader was devastated by his defeat to Obi-Wan on Mustafar, and the difficulties he had in this regard, difficulties that were unrelated to his loss of Padme. But what I want to do is compare this to a view developed by Vader within the current canon, where he had a very different interpretation of his defeat to Obi-Wan, found within the novel Lords of the Sith. While this isn't to say that Vader necessarily celebrated his defeat on Mustafar, he came to recognize numerous positive aspects that were made possible through the duel ending as it did. Underpinning this recognition for Vader, which occurred 5 years after the events of Episode 3, was that yes, he sustained devastating injuries on Mustafar, but this experience, quote, perfected his spirit, and allowed Vader to strengthen his connection to the Force. By going through what he did on Mustafar, he obtained incredible insight. Even more, just as seen within Legends, Vader also experienced pain related to his suit and cybernetics. However, this pain was ultimately welcomed by Vader, where he was able to move past the pain and not even feel it when he was fully within his suit. Perhaps the most important and revealing point made in canon through the Lords of the Sith novel is seen within Vader's view of his life within the suit. In the Legends material previously looked at, Vader described his earliest experiences within the suit as a prison of the worst sort, causing moments of claustrophobia. Even where he had more of an ambivalent view of the suit, he merely concluded that, like it or not, he and the suit were one forever. However, within canon, Vader described the suit as home, feeling at home when fully encased within the suit. Already, we see that 5 years after Episode 3, Vader had a much more positive view of the consequences of his defeat to Obi-Wan in canon. But the important point for our video is this. While Vader would view his defeat to Obi-Wan as containing positive aspects, such as perfecting his spirit and strengthening his connection to the Force, with Vader ultimately feeling at home within the suit, these were important aspects for him because he believed that these results achieved through his defeat on Mustafar prepared him and allowed him to adequately carry out what he saw as his role regarding the galaxy during the Imperial era following Order 66. As revealed in Lords of the Sith, initially, just as he did within Legends, Vader had a very negative view of his suit, indicating that this was a difficult element resulting from his defeat on Mustafar. However, this changed for Vader as a result of him developing a better understanding of his situation. Importantly, very different from what we saw in Legends, Vader concluded that wearing the suit and his defeat to Obi-Wan on Mustafar was his fate, with the duel ending the way it had been destined to happen. For Vader, his failure against Obi-Wan allowed him to learn, and provided him with an important understanding. So what exactly was it that Vader learned that would allow him to see his defeat to Obi-Wan as helpful? First, Lords of the Sith notes that Vader recognized that through his defeat to Obi-Wan, the result of him having to rely upon his suit and cybernetics separated him from everyone within the galaxy and made him singular. Not only that, but it allowed Vader to distance himself from the needs and concerns of the body that he felt had once plagued him. Having been separated from the galaxy and freed in this way, Vader saw that he was then allowed to focus solely on his relationship to the Force. This new focus clearly provided Vader with important insights about the galaxy, the Force itself, and what his role would ultimately be in the aftermath of Episode 3. Specifically regarding the Force, Vader came to recognize that the Force mandated the rule of the strong over the weak. That is, it mandated order. For Vader, he believed that the Force, quote, bent toward order, and the Force itself was what needed to be used for order to be imposed. Further, Vader believed that order required proper rule, which again required the rule of the strong over the weak. Without this, there would be chaos and disorder, and existence would be suboptimal. Therefore, given this insight Vader obtained following Episode 3, he was adamant that it was his duty to rule over the galaxy, a duty he believed was connected to the manifest will of the Force. After his defeat to Obi-Wan on Mustafar, Vader believed that Yoda had been wrong about fear, seeing fear now as a tool to be used by the strong, and eventually leading to true strength. In this way, since Vader's suit and cybernetics terrified others, he saw it as a positive, a further tool he could use to carry out his goals related to his duty to rule over the galaxy. Through this reveal in Lords of the Sith, we can see why Vader is positive about his defeat to Obi-Wan and why he felt at home within his suit. Vader came to believe that it was all part of his path to ruling the galaxy and carry out the manifest will of the Force. I'll note that the novel makes it clear that these new understandings Vader obtained regarding the Force were of course very different from the way the Jedi approached the Force, with Vader himself recognizing the differences. Through the insights Vader acquired following Mustafar and his failure against Obi-Wan, in not understanding that the Force required the rule by the strong, Vader believed the Jedi misunderstood the Force and were therefore destroyed. From the perspective of Vader, the approach of the Jedi, where an order was attempted to be created through harmony and peaceful coexistence, was foolish and a failure, only resulting in more disorder. Therefore, Vader saw that he and Sidious would impose order the way that the Force required, which was by conquest, where disorder was forced to submit to the order by bending the weak to the will of the strong. For Vader then, believing he had learned from the failure of the Jedi, the Empire would be one of enforced peace and imposed order. Vader saw that his failure against Obi-Wan on Mustafar was helpful to him in learning these conclusions, giving him the insight into what the manifest will of the Force was, which was order imposed by the strong, thereby granting Vader with a duty to rule over the galaxy and create an existence that opposed chaos and disorder. Through his defeat to Obi-Wan, Vader was separated from everyone within the galaxy, made singular in this way, and was freed from the needs and concerns of the body, thereby allowing him to have the important opportunity to focus solely on his relationship to the Force, with the fear his suit inspired being another tool that would allow him to accomplish his goals. In this way, although he certainly still understood and experienced the difficulties and frustrations that resulted from his defeat to Obi-Wan on Mustafar, within the current canon, Vader was far more positive regarding this failure. He saw his defeat as ultimately helpful because it perfected his spirit, it strengthened his connection to the Force, and through the insight it provided him regarding the will of the Force and the necessity of order being imposed upon the galaxy by those strong in the Force, the defeat prepared Vader and allowed him to carry out his duty regarding the galaxy, where the Empire would be much different from the failed approach of the Jedi. So there we have it, why Darth Vader concluded his defeat to Obi-Wan on Mustafar was ultimately helpful to him. We love making these videos, so why not subscribe for more fun Star Wars theories and discussions. Also, if you enjoyed the video, think about giving a like or leaving a comment. If not for me... For the manifest will of the Force.